T. Welcome to the Command Post. Post up, take command. I, of course, am your Commander-in-Chief, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. Ron Rivera spoke at the league meetings today. I told you that he would speak. If you watched the podcast, I said that we would be hearing from him today. And I thought he would have some things to say. I didn't expect him to have this much to say. I thought this was one of his more candid interviews where he was pretty much blunt, direct, to the point. There was not a lot of inferences that needed to be drawn from what he said. He pretty much said how he felt. And there were a number of tidbits that I took. I rarely take notes when I watch a press conference. I literally took notes on this press conference because it, to me, was so detailed and really had a lot of information inside of it. So let's kind of go through the things that I heard. Again, you can listen to the same press conference and come away with a totally different perspective on what was said. I'm going to give you what I heard from Ron Rivera during his presser, and there are a number of topics that we'll knock down today as he spoke at the league meetings today. So the first thing I want to address is Cole Holcomb. This is a guy that I've talked about. You know, we keep talking about Terry, and him needing to get a deal done, and rightfully so. We haven't talked about Cole Holcomb a ton, and he's in the same boat as Terry. Same draft class, needs a deal, not a first-round pick, doesn't have a fifth-year option. This is the first time I've heard them actually speak, or Ron in particular, on Cole's situation. And this is the first time we've heard Ron acknowledge that maybe Cole is the answer at middle linebacker. So that's a new perspective. That's a new take, because when the season ended, Ron didn't seem committed to giving Cole the opportunity to play middle linebacker. I talked about Cole Holcomb essentially begging at the end of the season in that exit interview to play middle linebacker for the team. And maybe they're starting to come around to the idea. Maybe they look at the draft, they look at the free agent crop, and they start to say to themselves, with only 6 selections, you can't fix everything. And I've been making this statement to you guys for the last month now. You can't fix everything in one offseason. Even if you have 15 draft picks, you can't fix everything in one offseason. But when you only have 6 draft picks, you can't fix everything. You can't get all the wants and the needs. You're going to have to pick which ones are the most important, which ones are the best options at the particular pick that you're sitting at, because you may have a player sitting there that you didn't expect to be there. It's not necessarily a position of need. Maybe it's a want, and it may supersede that need because this guy is sitting here and we have a really high grade on him, so you take him. And so I think when you get into the draft in particular, you throw needs necessarily out of the window. You don't throw it out of the window, but you have to take the best player available, especially in the first 2 rounds, I believe. After that, then I think the needs really start to come into play. As you get into the 3rd round and the 4th round and the 5th round and so forth, I think that's when needs start to become a little bit more of something that comes to the forefront. Whereas in the first 2 rounds, I'm looking for the best talent available. The guy that I feel like I get on my team and he could potentially be a Pro Bowler or an All-Pro, 2-3 years down the road. So Ron talked about Cole Holcomb and the prospects of him potentially playing middle linebacker and how they were really pleased with what they got out of him. And I think it lends itself to him getting a deal at some point. But it also talks to them potentially not going linebacker. Remember, I was very adamant. I said, with one of those first 2 picks, you have to come away with a middle linebacker. That mindset changes slightly if they're considering Cole Holcomb to be their middle linebacker of the future. That changes just slightly. Again, I'd have to see more evidence that this is what they want to do and this is the direction they want to go in. But if Cole Holcomb is going to be your penciled in strong side linebacker, then I still feel like the first 2 picks that you have in this draft class are imperative that you get a linebacker in one of those selections. If Cole Holcomb is being considered as a middle linebacker option, then you have other directions you can go in, and you don't necessarily have to take a linebacker with one of your first 2 selections. So this could change the way that they view the draft. And I think it kind of piggybacks off of the next thing that he said that I was listening, that I gathered. And he talked about Carson Wentz, and a lot of the questions directed at Ron early in the interview were Carson Wentz related. Why was he the right guy? This, that, and so forth. And we'll talk more about what Ron had to say about coming here to Washington, because I thought that was one of the more intriguing things that he said. But he talked about Carson Wentz. Really likes him as a person, loves the fact that he's family oriented, loved the fact that Carson Wentz was a us and we guy at the press conference, loved the fact that Carson Wentz owned up to the things that he did wrong in India. That was something that I said I enjoyed listening to Carson Wentz speak, was that he owned a lot of the things that went down and said, look, I didn't play well down the stretch of the season. In those final 2 weeks when the playoffs were on the line, I didn't get the job done, and I didn't play well enough. The team didn't play well overall, but he didn't play well in particular, and he owned up to that. I can respect that, especially having been an organization with quarterbacks in the past that haven't always taken accountability and culpability for their actions. It's always good and refreshing to hear a guy say that. That said, Ron talked about wanting to provide Carson with the best opportunity to succeed. He talked about the offensive line being in relatively good shape. Obviously, you lose both of your starting guards, and so you get Andrew Norwell back, and so that takes care of one of those vacancies, but you still have one. Again, I think they're going to fill it in-house with a guy like Sadiq Charles, but we'll see. They still got Wes Schweitzer as well. So I think they're fine, and he feels good about the offensive line as a whole overall, but he also mentioned skill positions. I think they're really leaning towards taking a receiver at 11. I truly think they're going to take Chris Olave. I think that's the guy they've penciled in. That's the guy they want. And when Ron gets a hard-on for a guy, as we saw last year with Jamin Davis, doesn't matter where you think he should go. If Ron has a good inkling about a guy, they're going to take him. And I think he has a strong inkling about Chris Olave. And if you ask me right now, the pick at 11 for Washington is Chris Olave. I told you last year, I thought the pick at 17 was Jamin Davis. It turned out to be Jamin Davis. I'm telling you right now, I think the pick at 11 is Chris Olave. He's talked about wanting to surround Carson Wentz with weapons for him to get the football to. And I can tell you for a fact, we don't have enough here in Washington. He knows that. And with Curtis Samuel injury situation last year, it really opened, I think, Ron's eyes to the fact that we just need more. We need more. It's not enough. We need more. So to me, I think that they want to go out and get a receiver, another pass catching option to help this offense along. They love Chris Olave. They love his temperament. They love that he's from Ohio State, just like Terry. They think they're getting another Terry McLaurin type of player, character-wise, on and off the field. And I think that's why they are so fixated, or specifically Ron is fixated on Chris Olave. So that's my personal opinion. And listening to Ron talk, I think they're going receiver with that 11th overall pick. Speaking of the number 11 pick, Daniel Jeremiah, we'll go back to Ron's interview here in a second, put a pin in that interview. Daniel Jeremiah had a mock draft recently that had Washington taking safety Kyle Hamilton out of Notre Dame at 11. Here's why I don't think that's going to take place. Not because I think he's going to be a top 10 pick. I think with him not running as fast as people thought, I think that's going to knock him out of the top 10. I think he'll be there at 11 when we are on the board. And I know a lot of you want Kyle Hamilton if he is available. I'm going to tell you this right now. I've talked about this in the past. I don't know how many times I've talked about it, but I know I've talked about it. Maybe I was talking to Panthers fans, and maybe I wasn't talking to Washington fans, but I'm talking to you now. I'm just telling you, I've looked at Ron's track record with safeties in the past. And I think I did mention this to you because it was relevant with this team because we didn't have a true difference-making safety. And I'm just telling you, Ron, I don't think values the safety position at a level that would require him to spend the 11th pick in the draft on that position. I just don't see Ron doing that. When you look at Ron's track record with safeties, it's usually stopgap guys like Bobby McCain. Like, that's the guy that fits the profile of a Ron Rivera defensive safety. Like, I'm telling you, it's the Roman Harpers of the world. It's Mike Mitchell. It's what's the guy that had the protest with Cap? Eric Reed. Those are the types of guys that Ron Rivera, it's Trey Boston 16 times in Carolina. Those are the types of guys Ron Rivera looks to plug into the safety position. He's not looking to spend a high-level draft pick on a safety. Go back in the archives, take a look at what Ron did over his lifetime in Carolina and what they had at the safety position, I don't know if you'll find a dedicated draft pick other than Trey Boston. And that was like a 5th-round pick they spent on Trey Boston. And Colin Jones and all kinds of guys that were back there that were, cast-offs, free agent acquisitions, veterans. Mike Adams is another name that they had in Carolina. Veteran players. They don't spend high-level draft picks on safety. I just don't think Ron Rivera values the safety position in that regard. I would be surprised, shocked, floored if Ron Rivera spent the 11th pick in the draft on a safety, because that is not what his track record suggests. And one thing about NFL head coaches, they essentially tell you how they move with their actions. Okay, they really don't switch it up very often. If this is how you believe, this is one of the things about scouts and GMs. When they have philosophies, they generally stick to it. If a GM says, I don't spend first-round picks on running backs, he's not going to draft a first-round running back. Don't care how talented the guy is, that's his philosophy. So I think Ron's philosophy at the safety position is, hey, I can get a dude. I don't need to spend the 11th pick in the draft on the safety. I don't think he values that position that highly where he's going to spend the 11th pick in the draft. So Kyle Hamilton, for as talented as he is, I just don't see him being the pick at 11, whether he's available or not. So let's pull the pin back out of the interview and go back to the interview. So to me, when listening to him talk, I think receiver is going to be the pick more and more. I listen to Ron and I look at what has transpired. I just think I told you, to me, he's put his eggs in his Carson Wentz basket. I know that he can get out of this contract after 1 year if it doesn't work. I'm aware that there's no dead money and there's no guarantees, and they could get out of this thing after 1 year, but that's not the goal here. That wasn't the goal for Indianapolis when they traded for Carson Wentz last offseason. I get it. Goals and things change after you spend a year with the guy and things either work or don't work. But I'm just telling you right now, Ron's hitching his wagon to Carson Wentz right now because he understands you got to have a quarterback to win in this league. And he's realizing how tough that's going to be here in Washington to get done, especially if you're looking to bring a guy in as a veteran to help win. And it'd be a lot easier if you were sitting there with the number 2 pick in the draft, but that's not going to be the reality of this football team. We're too good to end up with just 3 or 4 wins on the season. We're going to win 6, 7, 8, 9 games somewhere in that general vicinity. That's going to get you the 11th, 13th, 15th, 16th pick in the draft. Again, you can trade up, but we've already given away draft capital. We could be without a second-round pick yet next year, which makes it even tougher to trade up into the top 5 to get a quarterback if that's what you so desire. So at the end of the day, I think he really wants to put Carson Wentz in the best position to succeed, and we'll see what happens. I just think receiver is that position. Now, you get to something else Ron said, and I thought this was really this is what I've said this already, and I've drawn inferences. He's never come out and said this, but Ron didn't realize what he was taking on when he took this job. And I think one of the things he quickly realized is there's a lot of things that go on here that are non-football related that I have to deal with because I'm coach-centric, and this is why Dan put me in that position, so I would have to deal with this shit. He could dump it all on my plate in my lap, and now I got to deal with non-football questions, which I just want to coach football. I don't want to deal with the off-the-field shit. I don't want to deal with the brand and all of that. So that's not my job. I'm a football guy. Just let me do football. And I think he realized very early on this job comes with a lot more than just football. I think something else he realized is, damn, I knew the environment was toxic and I was going to have to come in and change the culture. I didn't realize the culture was this jacked up. And I think something that he's realizing now, and Ron's been on this campaign trail, I've talked about it all offseason, is trying to convince others that are outside this building that it's safe to come here to Washington, okay? It's safe. The bad man, Bruce Allen is gone, but a lot of people are like, hey, it's still another bad son of a bitch there in Dan Snyder. I'm good. But Ron is trying to convince everybody, the contrary, that, hey, it's safe. You can come here. And he got a little testy, got a little chesty. I like when Ron gets a little chesty about, free agents wanting to come here, choosing here. And Ron was like, how do you know we wanted them? He said, I'm sick of this narrative. He said, I'm sick of this narrative that nobody wants to come to Washington, that we pursued all of these players and they turned us down. That's not the case. That's not true. And he said, I'm just sick of, this whole narrative that people don't want to come to Washington. Why wouldn't you want to come here? We got a solid offensive line, 1,000-yard rusher, 1,000-yard receiver. This is a good football team. And I'm like, Ron, he's trying to sell. He's selling, and I love it. Bless your heart. But at the end of the day, the reason Carson Wentz is here is because we couldn't get a guy. Ron knows it, you know it, I know it. And he said the key thing though, and this is how I know he understands that they tried, they swung, they missed, nobody wants to come here. And he doesn't want to admit that, and he shouldn't admit that. That's not a good look for him nor the franchise. But this is how I know he understands that nobody wants to come here. Because the following statement after he said, I'm sick of the narrative, we got 1,000-yard rusher, 1,000-yard receiver, solid offensive line, the next statement out of his mouth was, you want to change the narrative, you got to win. Yeah, that's precisely the way to circumvent people not wanting to come here. And then he also said, there are often times where guys choose a locale because of the quarterback that's there. We see it all the time. How many guys, Jarvis Landry was released by the Cleveland Browns. He wanted out after the situation didn't work. He wanted to stay in Cleveland. So I want to make that abundantly clear. He wanted to stay in Cleveland, but they couldn't, come together on a situation that made sense for both parties. He got released. The minute they got Deshaun Watson back, he's like, yo, I'm willing to come back. Guys want to play with quarterbacks that they think can take them to the promised land. It's the reason Tyrann Mathieu chose the Chiefs over us. He looked at their situation. He looked at our situation. We probably were willing to pay him more money than the Chiefs were. And again, we chose Landon Collins because we knew he wanted to come here. And we gave him a ridiculous deal to persuade him to come here. But Tyrann Mathieu was a guy that I think was higher on the radar of Washington, and they quickly realized he wasn't coming here. He wanted a chance to win, and he looked at Patrick Mahomes and he said, I want to hitch my wagon to that cart right there because that guy looks like he's going places. So he hitched his wagon to that horse, and Patrick Mahomes took him to a Super Bowl championship. And so players want to play with quarterbacks that they think can win them a Super Bowl. That's not what we have here yet. Could be. But Ron is hoping that that's what Carson Wentz provides them, and that will then lend itself to guys choosing Washington. That is not the case right now. I think Ron sort of acknowledged that, but again, he's still on that crusade of, hey, this is a really good place to be. Why wouldn't you want to be here? But clearly, he understands that's nobody wants to be here. That's why they went out and got Carson Wentz, because he couldn't refuse to come here. The tight end position is something that I've talked about because I said, look, they're definitely interested, right? Like, clearly they wanted Ricky Seals-Jones back, and the Giants pretty much said, hey, we've got something they can't promise you. We got a starting position here for you. They can't promise you that. You're going to be a backup in Washington. I'm going to give you the same bread they're going to give you, but I'm giving you an opportunity to start more snaps. He didn't turn it down. He couldn't turn that down. So they're clearly in the market for a tight end. He did say that they like the tight ends on the roster. What else is he going to say? He said he likes the development of Samis Reyes. He said it sucked that he had the hamstring injury at the end of the season, but he said he's been at the facility. He's been working. They like his development. They like where he is. Clearly, they still want an upgrade at the tight end position. I think they're going to do something in the draft. Personally, I think they would have preferred a veteran because you've already got a young guy that you're developing on the roster in John Bates. But I think they're going to have to double up on the tight ends at the, with having young guys on the roster, because obviously Logan Thomas is on the mend. We don't know when he's going to be back. Ron didn't provide any further information on his recovery process. I don't think Ron actually knows where he's at in the recovery process. He probably had an update about a month ago on where he is, but I don't think he knows this date right now, March 29th. I don't think he actually knows where Logan Thomas is in his recovery process. But I can tell you this, they're interested in doing something at tight end. I don't think there's any free agents out there that move the needle for them right now. Ron already said, look, at this point of free agency, there's no big ticket items, no guys that are going to necessarily really hurt you cap-wise. So if you want somebody, you can go out and get them at this point. But he said, we're not interested right now in free agency because we need to turn our attention to the draft. Why? Because if you get a guy in free agency right now, you give him some good money, and then you ended up having a guy fall in your lap in the draft. Now you're like, shit, I'm taking a dude in the draft. Now you got two dudes, a veteran that wants to play and you're paying him, and a young guy that you want to get on the field. It's a conflict of interest. So he's like, look, we want to see, and this is what I told you guys. You know, you go out, you get the items that you have to have right away in free agency, and then you just wait, which is why I said I would really prefer it if Bobby Wagner didn't sign until after the draft, so it would give us an opportunity to see if we needed him or not. He's going to sign before that happens. I believe he's been sniffing around the Rams and the Ravens. I heard he's looking for 1 year, $11 million. We clearly can't do that. So I don't think he'll be coming here to Washington, and I don't think he's looking to come to Washington either. He's looking to go to a contender. You hear the names that are being bounded about, Dallas and the Rams and the Ravens. These are teams that, you know, were in the playoffs last year. Well, not Baltimore, but they're usually in the playoffs. Lamar Jackson doesn't get hurt. The Ravens are in the playoffs. And these are teams that have quarterbacks that are capable of taking them the distance potentially. You know, we don't know about Dak Prescott, but it gets them to the playoffs quite often. So at the end of the day, it's a much better situation after the draft to go and poach any of those second tier, you know, third tier free agents, or as I like to say, the clearance rack guys. Those are a lot easier to shop for after the draft when you know exactly what you need. There's no draft to fall back on like, hey, we'll just get it in the draft. Draft's already come and gone. You've gotten what you've gotten. Now you have to see what's out there and pick from what's left. So, and remember, there will be some guys that may be cap casualties that get released after the draft, because remember, there are teams holding on to veteran players right now because they want to see what they get in the draft, right? You got a guy that, you know, doesn't have a roster bonus that kicks in until, you know, July 15th, and he's playing tight end for you right now, and you're able to get a guy that you're really high on in the draft in the third round at the tight end position. You can then cut that tight end, save you some money on the cap, and keep it pushing. But you couldn't cut that guy because you weren't sure if that tight end was going to land in your lap during the draft, so you had to wait. If you didn't get that tight end, you would have kept the veteran on your roster. You just paid him his roster bonus. So that's how some of these things work. There will be more guys released due to, you know, teams getting the player that they coveted in the draft, or lucking up and having a guy fall in their lap that they didn't think they would have a chance to draft. And so now other guys become expendable. So we will be shopping again. Remember, Landon Collins' money comes available after June 1st. So there may be a little bit of breathing room for Washington to be able to go out and operate with some guys that may be available. I think, again, you'll see some extensions get done after that money becomes available. Terry, Cole Holcomb are two guys in particular that I'm looking at and saying, hey, if you want to get it done, now's the time. So we'll see what happens. But Ron, you know, talked about the tight end position, and I think they're looking to do something at that position as well. The last thing I want to talk about, this was something that I didn't expect Ron to say. He was so candid. He was so blunt with it. He's hinted at this in other press conferences. He's never come out and actually said it. But the thing I love is that I think he said this to Chase already. Like, Chase won't hear this and be pissed off that Ron said this. I think Ron has already said this to him, and all he'll be doing is hearing it again, this time in a public setting. But he was asked about Chase Young and what last year signified for him, you know, in terms of Chase. And Ron said that he hadn't arrived yet. You know, and he said, I love the fact that the young man is working as hard and diligently as he's working right now, because he gets it. He understands that he hasn't arrived yet. Last year was a wake-up call. It was a rude awakening. And, you know, remember, there was this whole discussion about Chase not being at OTAs, and he was shooting commercials for Under Armour and this, that, and the third. And everybody else was pretty much there. It was like him and Jonathan Allen, and I think Montez Sweat wasn't at OTAs. But then those other two guys showed up eventually. Chase really never did. So there was this big stink about him not being there, and then he has the flop of a season. And so there's been a lot of discussion about, is Chase going to be at OTAs this year? Ron's pretty much been like, yeah, he'll be there. Talk to him. I think he'll be there. But I was shocked to hear him say, yeah, no, Chase hasn't arrived. You know, like, he's going to have to step his game up, essentially, is what he said. Like, bro, that shit you were doing last year, it wasn't good enough. And, you thought you could just show up. And he literally said that phrase, that you can't just show up and have things happen. He's going to have to go out and make things happen. And it's refreshing to hear that. But I hope Chase is getting the message. It sounds like he's getting the message. Ron said he loves the way that he's working. And obviously he's coming back from an injury and he's rehabbing. So he may be at the facility rehabbing. He may not be. He may be in constant communication with head coach Ron Rivera. He may not be. But at the end of the day, Ron seems to be comfortable with where Chase is mentally, which is what I was concerned with. I said, I want to see Chase hungry this year. I want to see him, because last year he was so, kind of like passive with the non-sack stats and, how things were going. Like, oh, they'll come in. He was kind of nonchalant. Like, yeah, they'll come in bunches. I'm good. Don't worry. I'll have a 3-sack game here, 2.5-sack game there. Like, he didn't say that, but that's the way he was carrying himself. Like, oh, I'm fine. I'm out here doing my thing. Like, no, bro, you're not doing nothing other than stopping the run, which, that's a part of the game, but you're not impacting the game as a pass rusher at all. And so hopefully now, last season is a wake-up call for him, and he realizes he got to come with some better shit than just a bull rush and a half-ass attempt at a speed rush around the corner. He's going to have to come with some actual moves, setting dudes up, using his hands, being a technician. To me, as a pass rusher, being a technician is a huge part of winning. You don't have to be the most explosive athlete. The Bozas are really quick, but they're not super explosive. They are explosive, don't get me wrong. But they're not like Von Miller explosive off the edge, right? Like, there aren't this incredible first step that they're just blowing by you. They're technicians. Their hand usage is the best. I told you, their hands are the best I've ever seen coming from college into the NFL. Like, they were ready to go right out of the packaging from a hand usage standpoint. And some of the best pass rushers in the league, nope, they're not going to kill you with speed or, elite quickness. What they are going to beat you up with is their ability to be technically sound, set you up, thinking 2 steps ahead of you. They're playing chess, you're playing checkers. He needs to get to that point. And Ron pretty much said that. Like, he's got to come with his A game. He's got to step his game up. Because that shit last year wasn't good enough. I was like, okay, I hear you, Ron. So that was refreshing to hear as well. I thought it was a really candid interview from Ron in press conference. And so what I gathered from it is we're taking a receiver at 11. I gathered that Cole Holcomb is being considered for linebacker, middle linebacker, which means we're probably not taking a linebacker. If we do, it won't be early in this draft. So that alleviates a little bit of the strain there, if in fact they're considering Cole Holcomb as a middle linebacker. I also gathered that the narrative of quarterback and needing to have a quarterback is important to Ron, which is why they went out and got Carson Wentz. But I also learned that I said this before, and I truly believe this. Ron, this is a big move. This Carson Wentz thing is a big deal for Ron Rivera. This is the difference between him keeping his job here in Washington and potentially getting fired. If this doesn't work with Carson Wentz, he's not automatically getting fired. He's one step closer to getting fired, though, and he's as close as he's ever been to getting fired if it doesn't work. It's a big deal. If it works, Ron may be here for the next decade plus. So it's a big effing deal. Ron recognizes that, and that's why I think they're going to draft a receiver at 11. And I also learned that they're in the market for a tight end. May get one in the draft, may have to double back, get one after, the draft is over if they don't get a guy there. They're in the market for a tight end, though. And we knew that when they tried to re-sign Ricky Seals-Jones. So thought it was a really informative interview. I thought they were both interesting and important nuggets. You should check it out for yourself if you haven't had a chance to. I watched it live on Facebook, and thought it was a lot of good stuff there. So I look forward to chopping it up with you guys. I am a Washington fan, etched in burgundy and gold. My Washington spirit will never die. Washington spirit will never fold. Until we meet again, post up and take command. I got another little excerpt from the podcast that I'm going to upload that I think is pretty interesting. And I want to have you guys chime in with your opinions on the subject matter. So keep your eyes peeled for that video later on today as well. But in the meantime, you guys take care. Have a good one. And I will see you guys later.
LouieTeeNetwork.